What if there was an invisible epidemic? We're 3 years removed from the COVID crisis. According to the World Health Organization, 2023 marked the end of COVID as a global health emergency. But what if it created another crisis? And what if that crisis was invisible? Think about the scale of what we lived through. COVID touched every country, family, every dinner table on earth. We shut down economies, we changed how we greeted one another, we watched death counts scroll across the news like a stock ticker. Except this time the number going up was dead people. We called it a pandemic, but I'd argue that what we actually lived through was closer to a world war. Fought not on a battlefield, but inside our nervous systems. No trenches, no tanks, no parades, no memorials. The enemy was invisible, so the war went inward. And here's the part I don't think we've reckoned with. It ain't over. Millions of people are quietly walking around carrying trauma they might not even recognize as trauma. They just know that they get triggered, or they have really bad anxiety, or they're depressed and the medication isn't helping, and their relationships suffer or are suffering. The nervous systems are constantly telling us we're in danger, even when the danger is gone. And there's a clinical name for that. And many people experience it. And unfortunately, Western medicine, right, the DSM has not caught up with the World Health Organization. So if you go to a Western educated doctor, Western educated psychiatrist, you can't get diagnosed with this because it's not in their guidebook. And what I'm talking about is, hopefully you're with me by now, and you know I'm referencing complex PTSD. And that's the invisible epidemic. That's the invisible epidemic I want to talk about, because as devastating as COVID was, something else happened during those years. It forced millions of us to become aware of something we had barely talked about before: our nervous systems. And right? And so buried inside this invisible epidemic is an incredible opportunity for healing. Maybe the greatest we've ever had. What if COVID had a silver lining? Because the twist that nobody talks about is COVID did something for mental health that decades of awareness campaigns hadn't done. For a long time, the mainstream conversation around mental health lived almost entirely in one place: brain chemistry, serotonin, and dopamine, Prozac Nation, and driven to distraction. You have a chemical imbalance, here's a prescription. That was a story. I remember sitting across from a psychiatrist in 1993. He was explaining my grandmother's diagnosis to me. Depression, he said, with this quiet hubris, like he was letting me in on a secret. They just didn't know it back then, but now we know. 30 years later, we know something else. What my grandmother actually had, they were right. They said she had a nervous system breakdown, not depression as a chemical glitch in her brain. Depression as a nervous system pushed past what it could hold for far too long with no way out. So the depression wasn't necessarily the wrong diagnosis. It just wasn't the whole story. It's an underdiagnosis, and it's the same one that I had. Um, and so complex PTSD, it comes with treatment-resistant depression built into it. And you can't heal what you haven't fully named. Why is it treatment-resistant? It's treatment-resistant because complex PTSD is created by somebody in an abusive situation that they can't get out of, or they can't see a way out. Right? When it first came out, now I can't even find this article anymore, but when it first came out, there was an article about um, how black people and Jewish people were more susceptible to complex PTSD because of slavery and the Holocaust. And once complex PTSD entered our vernacular in America, that article was taken down because everything has to be about everyone. But that's part of it. But the other thing is that there was this realization of, oh, a child with abusive parents, this thing could be bigger than that, right? And so that's where the treatment resistant depression comes from, is the person is in an abusive relationship. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a partner, right? But some sort of scenario where the person is in a negative situation, they can't get out of it. So it's not just a chemical imbalance, but it is also a negative set of circumstances that they can't get out of, right? So COVID cracked that story open. Isolation, fear, grief, loss of control. Millions of people experience in real time what dysregulation actually feels like. And they started to become aware of their nervous systems and how they run our day-to-day lives and how they get shaped by growing up in a dysfunctional and abusive household. And so this shift, the apparent shift of the awareness created by COVID, had this amazing silver lining. Silver lining because a diagnosis makes you a patient. Understanding your nervous system makes you a participant in your own healing. That's the door COVID kicked open for millions of people like myself, whether they realize it or not. The Body Keeps the Score came out in 2014, and it sat there, respected, but not exactly a phenomenon for years. The chemical imbalance, medicated away model didn't really lose its grip until 2020, when COVID forced all of us to feel our trauma and feel how it lives in our own nervous systems. That's when The Body Keeps the Score exploded. And if you haven't read it or listened to it yet, because I don't know about you, but I can't read anymore from looking at screens too much in my life, probably. But um, it's a great listen or a great lead, a great listen or a great read, rather. Yeah, The Body Keeps the Score is amazing. Uh, what's his name? Bessel van der Kolk, a masterpiece. And once, once a book, once a book or once something, a story hits critical mass, you know what happens next, right? Oprah shows up, and in 2021, she put out "What's Happened to You." What happened to you with Dr. Bruce Berry? Um, you know, then something goes from a trend to a cultural shift. That's how powerful Oprah is. Um, and this might ruffle some feathers, but brain chemistry isn't nearly as complicated as we've been led to believe. And in a lot of cases, the way we've approached it, heavy reliance on medication as the first and only answer, has made things worse for people, not better. I think of Dr. Eamon here. He's my teacher, my mentor. I love Dr. Eamon. He's a psychiatrist known for pioneering brain spect imaging, actually taking pictures of brain activity instead of just going off of a symptom checklist. What's wild is how he stumbled onto some of his biggest realizations. When he went out on his own, Dr. Raymond realized that what he had was some patients were coming back worse. And he felt terrible about it. And that's when he said, that's when I realized there's a reason these drugs come with a black box warning on them. They hurt people. He didn't set out to challenge a system. The imaging showed him something the system wasn't looking at. He also found that ADD isn't one thing. His imaging work identified 7 different types of ADD, basically saying that you can have the same condition come from different areas of the brain. He went from let's guess and prescribe to let's actually look at what's happening and treat that. And he uses supplements probably like 80% of the time whenever he can. He only uses medication when he absolutely positively must have to. But the bigger picture I'm building toward is if COVID was our World War III, then what comes after has to be something on the other side of it, not just recovery, but elevation. We get so weird about the word enlightenment. Even in my own coaching training, we talked about people whose primary energy operated at what we call level 6 energy. And there's this short, sacred list of people to point to. Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, Thich Nhat Hanh, Deepak Chopra. Like it's a club with 4 members and the door's locked. And I ain't buying it. I think that door is open wider than we've been told. I think we can all walk through that door. I think the trauma this planet just moved through, as brutal as it was, cracked something open in the collective nervous system that makes that level of awareness more accessible now. Not guaranteed, but accessible. And there's something that we have to do first. We have to acknowledge that the war may be over outside of us while still raging inside of us. Wars end with treaties. There's no treaties for spiritual warfare. There's only you, your life, and whether or not you're going to take responsibility for your own healing. And it's not just individuals. Countries carry unresolved trauma too. Trauma theory says people return to their last unresolved wound under stress. I think nations do the same thing. You know? Look at how present World War II still is. Decades later, the alliance is the flashpoints, the way certain triggers can move an entire population overnight. Did anti-Semitism go up 400%? Was it there all along and it just became visible? We're not as far removed from our wounds as we like to think. Not as people and not as nations. That's the bridge I'm looking to build. From the trauma of the last few years to the possibility sitting right on the other side of it. Right? I don't talk about this to center myself. I talk about it because it's proof this bridge is walkable because I've walked it. Right? And so can you. And it just starts with the willingness. Right? You need the willingness to heal. The desire and the willingness comes first. And then you have to admit that you can't do it by yourself. That you need him. And maybe you can't access him directly. It took me 10 years. You know, I had a diligent spiritual practice for 10 years before my born again experience. You know? And I was a coach before COVID ever happened. But this changed my life so much because it exposed my truth and the truth about me, and that all this time I'm trying to figure out the right medication when it was my body, not my head, not my brain. It was my nervous system that had to be corrected, and I had all these triggers. And I know what to do because I just went through it all. And it's a much more holistic approach than talking to a therapist and taking a pill. So if anything I said, you know, if any of it resonated with you and you'd like to talk, by all means, you can comment. I'd like to talk to you. But honestly, I would invite you to email me, dave@davejax.com. Let's talk, you know? And it's really all I want, you know? Can we talk? Because I know I can help you if you want to get well. If you want to get to the other side of this, it's amazing. The other side of trauma. Um, you're so your greatness is on the other side of your trauma, and I know how to get you there. And I'm here for you. Have a great week.